There are some direct questions that I'll take through Twitter. And one is, if your server is compromised, your data is compromised, even if you're using HTTPS, right?
Yes.
That was a question to you. From,
Absolutely.
Maria
Yes.
Sjögren.
Yes.
And then there was a comment from Jessaby saying there are, for us in Sweden, I mean, what's happening in Russia can sometimes feel like, well, they're a very different society and we're a democratic society, but things like what you were just describing, those kind of laws are also being passed right now in the UK. Can you comment on that?
Oh, absolutely. I don't want to divide the world up into the West and the rest, and to leave people with the impression that everything that the West does is fine and everything that the other countries do is evil. EFF spends a lot of time fighting bad legislation and bad policies in the United States and in the UK and in Sweden and all over the world. These bad ideas are universal. And the desire to censor the internet to protect the children or to stop terrorism is absolutely not limited to Russia. And you should be aware of these arguments and you should be prepared to fight them wherever you see them.
Were there other direct questions to Eva at this point? Yeah. Do we have a mic for back there? Because we have a live broadcast, so it would be great if you use the mic. It's all the way in the back. Yeah, there are 2 questions from the back. It's great if you say your names, we know who you are. Because we're censoring you.
Chilling effects.
Hello, I'm Linda Kiby, and I'd like to know, what steps do you take when you use the web? How paranoid are you?
I think everyone has that question, Eva.
Well, the first thing that I recommend that everybody do is go to Surveillance Self-Defense and take a look at our section on threat modeling. One of the most common talks that I give when I go all over the world is I talk about how to understand what data you want to protect and who you want to protect it from, so that you don't go crazy trying to protect everything from everybody all the time, because that's just not possible. Personally, I fully encrypt the disk on all of my devices. I use a VPN. I frequently use Tor. I use end-to-end encryption for a lot of my communications, including messaging over OTR and PGP encrypted email. If you go to my bio on the EFF site, you will see a link to my PGP public key. You'll also see this on my Twitter bio, so it's very important to me. But beyond that, I mostly spend a lot of time thinking about what I want to protect and who I want to protect it from and how much trouble I'm willing to go through in order to make that happen.
Mm. Can you also talk, did we have one more question in the back? Can you talk a little bit more? I think you've inspired us a lot in the perspectives you have in the work you do, but I think many of us are also curious is, what is it actually you do at work, if you understand my question? Can you talk more about your role and what does it really mean in practice and how you work?
Well, there are 3 primary things that I do at work. The first is outraged blogging, really getting the news out about something terrible that has happened on the internet. Because I am on the international team, I spend a lot of time looking at the entire world that is outside of the United States, and when they try to pass bad laws, or when internet intermediaries cave to censorship and authoritarian regimes, I am there to let people know that it's happening. The other thing I do is I do a lot of security research. So I look into malware, which is targeting journalists and activists. I've produced years and years of malware analysis and reports on this. I also spend a lot of time talking to the people in vulnerable populations, not only to give them advice, but to really understand what it is that they're doing on the ground and what their needs are. Because it's really common for people in civil society to build all these guides to how you can protect yourself online without really understanding the day-to-day realities of people who are on the ground. Which is why the story that I told about Ethiopia is so important. You give some people some advice, and then it turns out they're missing a font. So that's really a lot of what I do in my time. And then the last thing that I do is I work on policy. So I spend a lot of time talking to companies about why they should be strong intermediaries and why they should not cave to censorship. I talk to startups about these problems that they're going to face before they ever face them, so that they have good privacy policies, so that they have transparency reports from day one, so that they don't sell out their users. And I also spend a lot of time, unfortunately, talking to governments, trying to convince them not to pass terrible laws. For example, one of the things that I'm working on right now is export controls in the United States.
And when you say I do a lot of research, in Swedish that translates into forskning, which is something you do in an academic institution. But you're also encouraging all of us to be sort of, I mean, we can do research, you can work, besides your day job, you can do a lot of more things and become an expert and talk at conferences and be opinionated about issues that you matter about, that you care about. So can you again just say, in your opinion, can any one of us really sort of be an opinionated advocate for the issues that you're passionate about? And how do you get to go to international conferences and be part of the agenda?
You don't need permission to do this. You don't need permission from an organization. You don't need permission from an academic institution. This is something that you can go out and do yourself. And it's certainly the way in which I get started. I started doing this entirely on my own and not under the sort of auspices of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And any one of you can do it too.
Mm-hmm. And you see fewer women than middle-aged white men doing this, right?
Oh, absolutely. I spend a lot of time going to security conferences, talking about my research, and I am frequently the only woman speaker on the agenda. I cannot even remember the last time I looked over an audience with so many women in it. I think this might actually be the first time I have spoken to an audience primarily comprised of women. Mm. And I think it's so important. I'm deeply, deeply honored to be here and very enthusiastic about this. But we all need to go out and support each other. The people who have experience need to find the people with less experience and mentor them. There are so few women in this field, and the only way we're ever going to change that is if we go out and find them and pull them in and train them and make them comfortable and support them. Mm. Otherwise, it's just going to be white men all the way down.
And that's what I love about, I'm probably one of the oldest people here in the room today, and I love seeing all of the mix that we have here, because we have women with more experience who are willing to share, who are also perhaps in a financial situation where they've come further in their career and they can take on a mentor or they can help out. And we have those of you, the women who are just starting off in your career, who are perhaps still studying. And I think there's really an urge and really a willingness and a desire to build these networks. And we have 2 days, 2 full days and 1 night to do that. So if anyone walks away here today or tomorrow feeling, I want to do more, but I don't know how to, I feel that I have failed, because you should all find somebody to hang out with and find somebody to work with. And I mean work as in not in perhaps your pay job, but to do a project with or to create an initiative with. And all day today and also tomorrow, we'll see great initiatives. Some of them are more formalized. You'll soon hear Miriam Nordfors, but you will also hear people like Britt Staxon tomorrow talking about Blank Spot Project, which is an excellent example of just doing it and raising money through crowdfunding and reaching out to a lot of people and affecting a lot of issues in a very, very short time. So just do it. And we have one question down there.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I was wondering whether, say I have 3 documents on my laptop that I really want to protect, and I encrypt them, doesn't that in some way label the document as really important? And so when somebody comes in, mines my computer, it can detect those 3 documents and say, well, this is the important stuff.
Yes.
There are like you're labeling them as, yes, go and look at this.
It's a big glowing red light that says, this is the important stuff. This is why you should encrypt everything. If you encrypt your entire hard drive, nobody is going to know the difference between the files that are pictures of cute kittens and the files that are very important things. In fact, many of my most important things are labeled pictures of cute kittens.
That's a very smart advice. Any other questions? Yes? Wait for the microphone.
Thank you. I just want to know your general opinion about when it's okay for government to spy on the users, like in mapping, IS, terrorism, and those kind of things. Is it ever okay? Is it a black and white question? A government should never spy or map the users, or is it okay in some cases?
Can surveillance be okay in some cases?
When is surveillance okay? I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. So let's be clear. Mass surveillance, dragnet surveillance, surveillance of everybody all the time by default is never okay. This is a violation of people's fundamental, basic human right to privacy. And this is something that EFF has said long and loud. We've said it in US courts, and we've also said it at the UN, where we've signed on to the 13 principles of the application of mass surveillance to human rights, basically saying, you can't. This doesn't work. Mass surveillance is incompatible with human rights. Having said that, the alternative to mass surveillance is targeted surveillance. And under the rule of law, in a country with rigorous oversight, this is the kind of surveillance that is considered to be okay. The reason why this kind of targeted surveillance is so galling in Russia is because there is no rule of law, there is only rule by law, and there is neither transparency nor accountability in the kind of targeted surveillance that they're doing, and it's particularly bad in this way. There are countries where in order to do targeted surveillance, you have to, not only do you have to go to a court, but that court actually means something. And under those circumstances, targeted surveillance is acceptable. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. It's just that there's a whole lot of other surveillance out there that I'm very deeply opposed to.
Do you want to follow up on that question? No? That's fine? We have a few more minutes. Tell us what's on your schedule ahead. What more initiatives are you going to be working on this year?
After this, I'm going to be traveling to Australia, where I am keynoting AusCert, which is the sort of big conference of rapid responders in Australia. And I'm going to be doing some outreach to the people who do security research, sort of trying to encourage them to do the kind of research that affects vulnerable populations. Because most of the time when security researchers do research for their jobs, they do it because they're interested in broad populations. They're interested in malware that infects lots of people. And they're not interested in these like tiny little vulnerable groups, because honestly, they're not the kind of people who buy a lot of antivirus software. So I'm trying to get them interested in sort of a more political movement. In the American hacker scene, there has been, until fairly recently, a belief that being a hacker is not political, which I think just about everyone I know in Europe thinks is ridiculous. Technology is political. Hacking is political. Security research is political. Everything that you do is political. And so I urge you to have good politics.
Okay, one final question. When I started out in '95 working with the web, many people who were also involved in business were actively feeling almost not obliged, but they were feeling that they needed to and they wanted to contribute to the development of the sort of the net as an open platform, and as the net as perhaps the first initiative that was a global initiative that connected people, and you had an obligation to do as much as you could. I met with people like Howard Reingold and Esther Dyson, who are on the EFF board, whereas now I don't see that kind of natural activism to the same extent with the new entrepreneurs and the new web the new web crowd, so to speak, in business. Am I wrong, or do you see it more in the United States?
I do see it in the United States. Google has been really instrumental in sort of gathering people together in this sort of way. Facebook has put money into these kinds of campaigns. Twitter has put money into these campaigns. But there are some areas in which our interests and these companies' interests diverge. And that's really where I think people need to concentrate their attention. I think that these big internet intermediaries have a lot of money, and they can spend a lot of time campaigning for the stuff that works for them and that makes them money and that makes them look good. But the stuff that is not politically expedient for them, such as standing up for the privacy rights and the free speech rights of users in Russia, that's a lot less sexy for them. And the only way to hold them accountable is to remind them that their users hold them to this standard. And you guys are their users.
Will you stay for the day?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and you will stay for the party as well.
I will stay for the party.
I think
no, not the party.
You've inspired us so much. And hand up if you feel inspired and you feel encouraged to go on and fight. Thank you so much, Eva.
You.
We're so happy to have you.
It's my pleasure.